Shocker. Imagine my surprise. Just imagine my surprise when Uncle Casey found out that the WNBA is struggling to maintain their ratings without Caitlin Clark. To make matters worse, and this is something I have definitely noticed in the last 3 or 4 weeks, especially since the All-Star game.
What happens when a league builds its entire empire on the shoulders of one rookie? It begins to crumble. This is the shocking story of how the WNBA stream season is teetering on the edge of disaster, all because its brightest star was left unprotected. The league's viewership numbers are in a freefall, and the reason is painfully obvious: Caitlin Clark is not on the court. This isn't just a temporary slump, it's a full-blown crisis that exposes the league's dangerously fragile foundation and a series of devastating missteps that may have permanently damaged its future.
And that problem is Caitlin Clark not playing in WNBA games. Now, what all does this affect? The ratings are plummeting. Guys, there's ratings for a couple of these games that are eye-poppingly bad. We're talking about down in unrivaled territory.
The league's golden goose this season was the electrifying rivalry between Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese, a matchup that was supposed to carry the WNBA into a new era of popularity. And at first, it worked beyond their wildest dreams. Their initial game pulled in a massive 2.7 million average viewers, peaking at an incredible 3.1 million. It was a ratings bonanza that had network executives salivating and the league boasting of a new dawn for women's basketball. But that dawn has quickly turned into a terrifying twilight. With both stars recently sidelined by injuries, the ratings for their latest marquee matchup plummeted to a shocking 1.3 million. That's a catastrophic loss of 1.4 million viewers for what was supposed to be their premier showcase. But this ratings collapse wasn't just a stroke of bad luck, it was the predictable, and frankly, inevitable, result of a season-long failure to protect its most valuable asset.
Struggling to maintain interest. Now, in fairness to the dump, the ratings I'm about to share with you guys, they're not bad. Matter of fact, some of them are actually good, at least when compared to what this dump used to draw, which was nothing. But the reason I think the WNBA is in trouble has less to do with these ratings and more to do with what I think is coming.
Caitlin Clark's groin injury didn't happen in a vacuum. It was the culmination of weeks of relentless, brutal, and physical targeting that went largely unpenalized by the league's officials. From the very start of the season, fans, analysts, and even Clark's own coach, Stephanie White, have been sounding the alarm about the egregious lack of calls and the blatant disrespect shown to the league's biggest star. The video evidence is undeniable. Clark has been subjected to a shocking number of hard fouls, illegal screens, and overly aggressive plays, yet the league has done virtually nothing to curb the violence. It's a shocking abdication of responsibility that has not only put Clark's health at risk but has also jeopardized the very foundation of the league's newfound success. And as if ignoring the on-court assaults wasn't bad enough, the WNBA's handling of her injury devolved into a bizarre and desperate PR game that insulted the intelligence of its own fans.
And the craziest thing about this last groin injury with Caitlin Clark is how it's been covered. The day after she had the groin injury, she was listed as day-to-day. And then a couple weeks after that, then she was listed to being out indefinitely. Now, ESPN had August 12th as the circled return date for Caitlin Clark to get back onto the court. And just yesterday, she was listed as a game time decision for today's game against the Dallas Wings. And then after practice yesterday, Coach Stephanie White basically came out and said, like, no, Caitlin Clark hasn't even been practicing. So they changed it from a game time decision to her being out.
The official updates on Clark's condition have been a masterclass in misdirection. What was initially listed as day-to-day mysteriously morphed into out indefinitely, leaving fans in a state of confusion and frustration. Then, in a move that Reeked of sheer desperation, she was suddenly and inexplicably listed as a game-time decision for a game her own coach later confirmed she had no chance of playing in, revealing that she hadn't even been practicing. This wasn't about providing fans with transparent updates, it was a calculated, cynical gamble to trick them into tuning in, a move that threatens to erode the very trust the league so desperately needs to survive. But the empty arenas and cratering viewership for other games tell a story that no amount of PR spin can hide.
Place, and I get it to a certain extent. The fans, the media does not need to know every little thing that's going on with Caitlin Clark's injuries, especially a star player like that. We will never know all the information, nor should we know all the information, and that's actually good for Caitlin. It protects her for when she does come back on the court. She can't be targeted. Teams can't use a certain injury or ailment against her if people don't really know what is going on. But the reporting of her timeline in general, there has been no rhyme or reason to what has been shared about it. To put her as a game time decision for today's game, and then Coach Stephanie White basically coming out and saying she has done no practicing with the team, that's crazy. And I brought it up in my video yesterday.
The numbers are brutally, undeniably clear. Without Caitlin Clark, the WNBA's historic growth narrative completely vanishes. Games not featuring the Indiana Fever are struggling to attract even 200,000 viewers, with some matchups, like a recent Sun vs. Sky game, pulling in a pathetic 180,000. This isn't evidence of league-wide growth. It's a one-player stimulus package. When Clark plays, the numbers spike to historic highs. When she sits, they crater to depressingly familiar lows. This alarming dependency hasn't gone unnoticed by the networks, and you can be sure that their patience is wearing dangerously thin.
Throw her back in the mix when all of these teams are at peak condition, and we already know what happens when Caitlin Clark gets back out on the court. Teams play defense on her differently. They play extra physical with her. There's all of these different factors that come into play. That's why I'm sort of leaning to the point of maybe Caitlin should be out for the rest of the season. Maybe this season is just done for her. Maybe it doesn't make sense for her to come back into the mix if the Fever aren't contenders. Are the Fever contenders at this point? I'm just not so sure. Do you risk another injury that can again compound and turn into something else down the line?
Major networks like ESPN, CBS, and ABC invest millions of dollars for consistent, reliable viewership, not a product that completely collapses the moment one player is out of the lineup. The dramatic, million-plus viewer drop-off is a massive red flag for advertisers and network executives, who are now undoubtedly questioning the league's long-term viability and its ability to deliver on its lofty promises. This puts the WNBA in a dangerously weak and vulnerable position as it heads into negotiations for a new, potentially billion-dollar media rights deal. The league's carefully crafted narrative of unprecedented, widespread growth is now being exposed for what it truly is, a dangerous and unsustainable fantasy, built on a single, fragile, and unprotected asset.
Should not be thrown back into any mix if she doesn't have significant practices under her belt before she goes into game speed.
The league has relentlessly pushed the storyline of a women's basketball revolution, but the harsh reality is far more sobering. The WNBA's success this season is not the result of a sudden, organic surge in popularity for the league itself, but rather the Caitlin Clark effect. True, sustainable growth would mean the league could maintain a respectable level of interest even without its main draw. The current ratings freefall is definitive proof that it cannot. The WNBA's entire business model, it seems, was built on the hope and assumption that one player could single-handedly carry it to the promised land. Now, with the playoffs approaching and its biggest star on the sidelines, the WNBA is facing a terrifying question it never wanted to answer.
You can try to simulate game speed as much as you want in practice. You will never be able to. Game speed is game speed. There's also a lot more adrenaline, all of these different things pumping when you're playing in front of a sold out crowd that the Indiana Fever do every single night. If I'm their coach, she needs to practice for at minimum a week, at the minimum. She needs to be doing everything in practice for at least a week before you throw her back in the mix. Now you're going to throw her back in the mix when all of these teams are at peak condition.
The WNBA built its entire 2025 strategy around one player, and now, with her sidelined due to injuries that were clearly exacerbated by a shocking lack of protection, the entire structure is trembling on the verge of collapse. The league's catastrophic failure to safeguard its most important asset has not only led to a ratings disaster but has also exposed a business model that is dangerously dependent, recklessly short-sighted, and ultimately, completely unsustainable. The WNBA was handed a golden opportunity, a once-in-a-generation talent who brought millions of new fans to their doorstep. But did its own negligence, its own failure to act, and its own short-sightedness just squander the greatest gift it has ever been given? What does the future of the league truly look like if it can't even protect its own biggest star?
The WNBA just got a painful